Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the Ultimate Cockpit from Spenard Simulation, a heavy, welded, prefabricated sim racing cockpit solution. This is a two-part video review, where we take all the parts and assemble the cockpit in part 1, titled The Build, and then add our sim racing hardware and finally driving this cockpit in part 2, titled The Setup. So let's get to it. So now before we actually start the assembly of these pieces, thought we would take a closer look at them first and then assemble them and just go that route. We'll see how it works out as we go along. First off, I want to show you guys this side panel assembly. At least that's what I'm calling it. It's everything pre-welded together, which is going to make this rig very easy to build. It's probably going to be one of the easiest ones I've built in a while. But anyway, it's going to make it easy because, well, we don't have to assemble all these parts. They're already pre-welded for us. Now, this is a powder coat finish on all of these pieces. And these are steel tubes, rectangular and square. And let's get a quick measurement here on the tube sizes. First, the main tube that everything rests on is 2.5 inches or 64 millimeters wide. Or tall, depending on how you're measuring it. And we'll go ahead and measure across, and that is 38 mils or 1.5 inches. So a substantial piece of tubing here, steel tube, to support all the rest of it. And we've got up front here, let's go on this front quadrant. I got my little cart here so we can move this around because this is a very heavy unit. And up here we have a bar that is 2 inches wide or 51 mils and 26 mil thick that way, and 26 mil is going to give us about what is that, about 1 inch, right? So that's how all this stuff is standard, the threads and stuff, so I'm assuming this is going to be inch measurements how this was built. Now the main tubes here that are supporting this part of it are 1.5 inches, I believe. Yes, those are 1.5 inches, so that's going to be about 38 mil. And then we have 3 pieces here, and then we have 1 inch. I believe this is 1 inch, maybe. Yeah, that's 1.25 inches actually, or 32 mil for these parts here that are going up here and the one over here. And on the back part, I'll roll it down here. We have, again, I believe these are 1.5 inches. Yeah, 32 mil or 1.5 inches. Now, the thickness of this tubing, I'm thinking it's 3/32 because it's not quite 1/8 of an inch. If I mic that out over here, so get this over here, that comes out to, in millimeters, it's 0.2 mils. Are we in mils? Yeah, there. Mil, it's 4.5 mil thick, just 4.6 mil thick, and we're looking at yeah, this is an 1/8 inch, 1.62. Or 1.28 is actually 1/8. The last time I checked my math. Yeah, this is not quite that thick. All right, so right, yeah, that's more like just under 1/8. I'm going to say 3/32. So we have this cross member that's going to be attaching these two side assemblies to. And it is also 1 inch wide, which would be about 26 mil. And height on it's going to be 2 inches. Which is, what, 50-something mil, 51 mil. Right. So those are our measurements. Again, you can get a closer look at this powder coating here. I don't know how well this is going to show up. I'll try to get the light to bounce off of it for you a little bit. But yeah, it's pretty nicely done here. And good thing about black on steel, black powder coating, if you ever nick this, it's going to be easy, I think, to take some semi-gloss black and kind of touch it up so you can't see it. Right. So let's go ahead and take this panel and look at the other side. First of all, we got these side panels, thin side panels that have been welded into this panel. You can see it here, and you can see the one back here. And then you can see holes in this that are actually going to support the seat platform or the seat tray that's going in here. And go ahead and see if I can flip this around. This is a very heavy unit, as you might imagine. This thing weighs, and I got a picture of it here, 28 pounds, 11 ounces. So almost 29 pounds for this whole assembly, and this is just one side. So yeah, this is going to be, I think, a pretty heavy-duty unit. Now flip this over so you can see how these side panels are put in. And slide her down. There we go. And you can see we have these spot welds all the way around. Again, it's going to make it very sturdy. And you can again see the slot down here and the holes on this side, which is easier to see where the pedal tray is going to fit, so that we can raise the rear of the pedal tray and we can actually use the slot up front. Now the rear height adjustment, looks like it's centered on 32 mil or about an inch. I imagine that's what that is. Well, actually 1.25 inches. So yeah, 1.25 inches centers on these holes. So that's the height that we can adjust it in incrementally on this part. And of course the slot is just going to adjust the rake or the angle of the tray itself. Right, got our logo laser cut into the metal panel here. And let's go down here. Again, this other panel is also spot welded in, and those holes are going to support our seat, which actually the spacing on these holes looks to be a little bit less. And yeah, that's 3/4 inch on the centers here. And that's 18 mil. So 18 mil, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. So that's a nice incremental adjustment, I think, for the seat height. Right. So what else do we want to look at here? This bar, when we actually attach this, and I'm going to actually obviously put this on the ground, and we'll go to that shot of me actually putting these together in a minute, but it fits right here, and it's going to fit in between both of these side assemblies. And it's got 2 holes here, and we'll be using this hardware here that comes with the kit, obviously. This is a 3/16 hex head cap socket on the top here, and we have a 7/16 safety nut there. You can see the nylon on it. Get a focus. So this is what we'll use 4 of these, and they're 2 inches long. I believe they're 2 inches long. Before I say something that's not right, let me measure that out. Yep, 2 inches. And also, we have these guys to put on. And these are the foot pads, or feet for it. And I believe, yeah, this is a 5/16 inch thread, 10 pitch. And all of the nuts that are around here, here's one in here, are the same thing. All right, so I could actually put it here if I wanted to. But of course, we're going to put it on the bottom. I'll go ahead and flip this back around of the assembly, because that's where we need feet, right? Move my bar out of the way. I might be able to do all this without wrecking something. All right, so again, all of these nuts that you see are welded to the frame. They got little spot welds to hold them in place, which is nice. They shouldn't move if you spot weld them on there. And what goes in these is going to be these little knobs. We got a lot of these knobs. And of course, these are adjustment knobs. So whatever we're putting into these pieces of metal here, we're going to be able to tighten and loosen them, slide them back and forth, and then lock them down with these knobs. So these knobs are also 5/16 10 pitch threads on them. So it's kind of nice that everything matches. And I'm sure during the assembly and production, it's nice to use the same thread all the way through. Right. Anything else I want to talk about? That's pretty much it. And what we'll do next is we'll go over, and I got some cardboard down on my floor in the SRG here, and we're going to take both of these side assemblies and, like I said before, put them together, connecting them with this crossbar. So we'll get to that next. Right, so now we can go ahead and get the 2 main side panels assembled. And a very simple thing to do here, I've already actually put the feet in, and I've left them out about 1/4 inch or so, so that if I need to screw it in to adjust it to make it level, then I can do that instead of just screwing them all the way in. Yeah, I think that's probably the better way, so I can move it back and forth either way. But we'll see once we get it up. Very simple here. Again, our pre-assembled side panels. Now these are very heavy units, so yeah, you want to be in a clear area, and you don't want anything underneath it or anything in case you drop one of these. It's going to definitely mess something up. And just like we saw before in the closer look for these side assemblies, we're going to be using these cap socket head screws, and they are 3/16. And we're going to be using these nylon safety nuts on the other side of them. Very simple affair here. Couldn't be easier. We're going to actually attach the bar across, and you want this part of the bar, the flange here, pointing towards the rear of your rig. So that's how I'm going to do this one. And this guy's kind of in my way, so I'll slide him out. And this is a hollow tube in the bottom here. This is going through, so it might kind of hang on you going through the other hole, but you just have to wiggle it around a little bit so you can find the other side of the hole. And there it is. Not too bad. And we'll go ahead and I'll hold these bolts as I slide this one on. And then I get my nuts on here. And I'm not going to torque this all the way down. Obviously, it would be a bad idea because when we're assembling this, we want things to be kind of loose so that when we go to the back and assemble that part, and we put the pedal tray in, the seat tray in, that kind of stuff, we want it to be kind of loose to do that. But I am going to tighten it down a bit because I don't want it flopping around too much. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and tighten this up. And remember, this is a 7/16 nut on the other side here. And I'm using this little flex joint because of the angle that I'm on when I tighten these up. If I can't get this drill all the way up straight, so I just use a little flex joint there on it, which works perfectly for the task at hand here. So we'll just go ahead and snug these up a little bit. Not much, just so that I have the nylon part of that safety nut engaged on the bolt itself. There we go. So actually that's a little bit too snug, Barry. So yeah, you don't want it too tight because then everything's going to bind up on you and you won't be able to get your holes aligned. Crazy stuff will happen, trust me. If I can get this back on my socket, everything will be great. Come on, get on there. There we go. There we go. Just a little bit, loosening it. In fact, that's enough right there. So the bottom was the one that was too tight. Right. Easy enough. Now we'll just go over to the other side, get our other side panel in position. And we'll go ahead and put our bolts through here first. Here's one. And going across, get my other hole. There it is. Piece of cake. Right. So now I'm going to just lift my bar up and kind of slide these together. Again, I'm holding the back of these bolts with my fingers so they won't slip back through the other side when I'm trying to do this. All right, so we get our nuts on. Give them just a snug, not really snug, but just give them, like I said, I like to get the nuts at least engaged on the nylon safety part before I move on. You don't really have to do that, but that's just one of the things. That's just the way I do it. Okay, get this one on. All right, so we're still jiggly, as you can see. The whole thing is moving. So now we can go back, and what we'll do the next segment will be actually attaching the seat tray to the back. And that'll give us a box then, and you could probably actually tighten it down then, I would imagine. But I still don't want to tighten it all the way down until I get my pedal tray and that kind of stuff. Anything inside of here, I'd like to have that in there before I tighten it all up. So we'll get to the seat tray next. Okay, so now we're going to put the seat tray in. And we'll take a quick look at the seat tray itself. And again, the same theme continues on here. We've got some welds, obviously holding everything together. Looks like we have a plate here. That's a flat plate welded to an angle plate of steel. And then we have a 1-inch tube going across to the other side, on both sides, obviously. Now, there is a front and rear to this. The front is where these two holes are, right here. So you want to make sure that's going to the front of the rig. We also have some other mounting holes for seat rails to use on a slider if you're going to set it up that way, or you might have to drill your own holes if you're using a seat like I am, which is a Sparco with the side mount brackets. So yeah, this is a pretty heavy unit, just like all the stuff here, it's just heavy. We're going to be using these 3/4 inch cap head socket screws, or bolts. And again, a 7/16 steel nut with the nylon safety insert or anti-vibration insert to actually put this on the rig. So yeah, oh, and one more thing. This metal here is actually an 1/8 inch. I actually mic'd that out. So yeah, we have, for the flat pieces, it's actually a little over 1/8 of an inch, the way it's micing out here. So yeah, nice and thick pieces of metal for the flat parts too. So what we'll do now is go over to the rig and put it in. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put the seat tray in. And again, we saw before there are multiple holes on the side of this for adjusting. And of course, we're going to be using the holes right here to mount this to the sides. And you can also, not just for height alone, let's see if I got this spread far enough. Looks like I need to kind of spread this out a little bit. There we go. you can actually not only do a height adjustment here, but you can actually rock this if you need to for whatever reasons and get a cant on this tray itself. That's a pretty cool feature, I think. Something that I was just thinking about once I was looking at the video from the actual website at Spenard Simulation. So yeah, not a bad thing to have available to you. So what we're going to do again is put these 3/4 inch socket head cap bolts in, and we have nuts. Got one sitting over here with the nylon inserts, and easy enough. I'm going to go with the very lowest hole here and go ahead and lift this up and put it in. And I'll get the nut on the bottom and just go around all 4 corners, obviously, and do the same thing. So we'll just speed that up real quick. All right, so there you have it. You can see that it is now located in the right position. We've got our 2 holes in the front. Easy enough to assemble, just 4 bolts and 4 nuts. And yeah, we're going to be off to doing the front now. We're actually going to go ahead and do the motor mount, or the steering wheel motor mount assembly, and put that across the top here. And then probably we'll look at the pedal assembly after that. But we'll get to the motor mount assembly next. Now we can actually mount the wheelbase, the support bar, and we're going to have a couple other bars mounted in these sleeves right here. And again, nice welded unit here, and we can see we've got nuts on the bottom that are welded, and of course that's going to allow us to adjust the height of our wheel once we get it assembled. These are the 2 holes we're going to be using to attach it to the uprights that are on the side panel assemblies of this rig. And we're going to be using these 1.5 or 1.5 inch socket cap head screws. Again, this is all 3/16 size on the head, and we have a 7/16 lock nut on the bottom. So we'll go over there and stick this thing on. All right, now we're going to go ahead and put part of the wheelbase mount assembly in, and that's the crossbar. And you want to make sure that these pieces, these ones with the holes in them, that we're going to be sliding the bars back up and down, you want to make sure they are pointing to the rear rather of the rig. Now let's go ahead and just it's kind of neat because it kind of rests here. You don't have to hold it up completely with your hand. And we're going to use these 1.5 inch bolts here, and we'll just slide those in, and they're going all the way through this pipe and going into, obviously, the crossbar hole. So we'll put one in. I'll go ahead and put both these in if I can. There we go. And I'm just finger tightening this. Again, you saw me earlier use the ratchet assembly, and I really decided just to do everything by hand because this rig really needs to be loose to get everything to fit in. Because even though I just had a little bit of the nut started down there on that crossbar on the front piece, engaged with the nylon insert, it was still too tight to get this, well, not too tight to get the bar in, but it made it more difficult, if you will. That's right. So we got one side in. Let's go ahead and get the other side in. Again, this is, I'm probably going to say this a lot, this is an easy rig to put together. I mean, everything just goes right in. The holes are lining up very well. Nothing's worse than getting something and then the holes don't line up like they're supposed to, and cause you all kinds of headaches. Mostly getting the, if it's a hole, I usually have to get the rat tail file out and start working on that hole to make it big enough or make it oblong so it can reach where the bolt's going in. But it's not the case so far here. Everything's looking pretty good. So now we got it finger tight. And yeah, now that we got this piece in, we're going to go ahead and set the pedal tray in. And we'll take a look at what the pedal tray looks like next. Here we have the pedal tray assembly. Now this thing is a hefty piece of the unit. It's very heavy, and the reason being is we've got this plate on top that's got the slots in it so we can put our pedals and still mount our pedals sideways and get them exactly spaced the way we want to. And this is actually pre-cut for Husingveld engineering pedals as far as the spacing for those. And I'm going to actually be mounting some HPP special edition, the PRX special editions onto this and see how that goes. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it as far as the spacing. Hopefully it's close to the same. Right, so if you look on the bottom here, we have a slider assembly. Let's see, let's put this over here. This is heavy. And which is nice, because once we have our pedals mounted, then we can just move them in and out at will just by using the seat slider assembly. So all this is integrated, and you can see all the welds here, the way he's actually put the welds in for the angle iron for the side perimeters, and of course we have a flat piece of steel in there. Yeah, very nice looking, and we can see we actually reinforced with some angle iron here on that top steel plate. And I'm just going to pull that off so we can get a better look at that. And as far as mounting this, you don't have to have this top plate, which we're going to mount it using the slot here and a hole over here. And of course, from the looks of it, with the slider being up here, I'm thinking the slider is going to be in the front parts, but we'll take another look at that in a minute. But here's how we're going to mount this to the actual rig. Easy enough. Let's go ahead and pull these out. These are 3/16 cap head button screws, if you want, caps. And we'll just go ahead and pull. See how easy this comes off, which is going to make this easy for mounting our pedals. Now this whole plate just comes off, and you can again see the bottom of it where those reinforcement bars are. This is a stout unit also. Yeah, I don't see any flex being introduced in this plate. Let me just kind of set this off to the side. And then we'll take a look at the top of this assembly and how he's done this. And what they've done is actually weld some nuts onto the seat slider itself. Normally you'd have to attach that plate, you'd have to put a bolt through it and then a nut on the other side, which can be a bit of a pain, but this does two things. First off, it makes it nice and low as far as the interference. There's not going to be a nut on that side of it inside the slider, typically where you'll see a nut, or the button head side of a screw if you have one that can get in there. And yeah, so having the nut welded on is very nice, because then we can just take that pedal tray top off at will and change our pedals out anytime we want to, leaving this part of the assembly in the rig, which is very cool. I like the way this is designed, actually. It's well thought out. And yeah, having adjustments back and forth for your pedals. To be honest, I've never had one on sliders before, so I'm anxious to try this once I have everything mounted and tightened up and we're running the rig, how easy it is to manipulate this and get these sliders to go back and forth like that, and to adjust your pedals, which is great if you change wheels or you have a deep dish wheel and a flat wheel and you got to adjust your seat and your pedals at once. It's nice to be able to just fine tune all that. Or if you have somebody coming over who is shorter or taller than you, and you can quickly adjust your rig to that person so they can get in and be comfortable and be in a decent ergonomic position, at least when they're driving. Right, so what we'll do next is go over to the rig and put it in. So now we'll go ahead and get the pedal tray mounted, and proper orientation will be with the front adjustment bar pointing to the rear of the rig. And again, we saw the holes on the sides here where we can adjust the height and of course the angle that we want to put this on. Now we're actually going to be using these 3/4 inch bolts with some washers and nuts, and we're going to have a washer on each side. So one washer on the outside of the rig, and then the other washer is going to be on the inside where we put the nut. So we're going to go ahead, and probably the best way to do this is, first of all, you got to figure out where you want it, and I'm just going to go pretty much with being as low as possible, because that's usually a good place to start. And again, not that big of a deal to come in here and adjust it again. Get our hole in here. There we go. And now we're going to put a washer on the other side. Let it rest right there, and go ahead and get a nut on it. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of go over to the other side and get this part put on. So let's do that. One washer, one bolt. Easy enough. And the washer on the other side. And we'll get our nut started. Again, figure tight. We want to keep this thing as loose as possible. Right, so now I'm going to lift it up, And I'm not sure how I'm going to want to do the rake here. So I'm just going to kind of, again, it's easy enough just to loosen this and make your rake adjustment. Let that sit there like that. Once you have your pedals in, I'm probably going to leave mine flat because that's typically the way that I have them. Now, depending on if you're running like a Thrustmaster, a Logitech pedal set, or maybe a Fanatic, then they tend to be laid back, especially the Logitechs and Thrustmasters. So you're going to want to have some forward tilt on it. So that means you're going to bring the back higher if you have that type of pedal. But again, it's hard to tell until you actually have it sitting on the plate and then seeing where your feet are going to be. So we'll go ahead and put this last bolt in, and then we'll be done. Again, this thing is very quick to put together, which is a good thing, because when you get your rig and you get it in the house, your new rig, you don't want to spend a lot of time messing about trying to get it assembled. You want to just get in it and drive, right? All right, there we have it. So we've got the tray mounted. I haven't put the cover back on yet because, remember, I want to mount pedals to that before I do that, but the cover is just going to sit straight on top of this. In fact, let me go ahead and put it on just so we can see what it looks like. Why not? But it's just going to sit there because we're going to end up having to take it back off anyway to put our pedals on. But we'll sit it on there, see how it looks. And there we go. Right. So, pedal tray is mounted. So now what we're going to do is, there's another piece of a bar that goes across here that for this unit up here, this only on the Ultimate rigs. And there's this bar here that goes across and acts as a reinforcement plate up here. And that is just 2 bolts to hold that in. And I'm just not going to show you that. It's just a real simple thing to bolt onto the existing holes that are already tapped for threads. So we're just going to put the bolts in. There's no nut to go on the other side, which makes things a little easier. So we'll get that installed. But when we come back, I think I'm going to go ahead and snug everything up and see how it's looking. Now we'll go ahead and mount the wheel base deck, if you will. We've already mounted the crossbar for the wheel deck, and actually there's 3 parts to this. We have this assembly here, and again, you can see the welds there holding everything together. Again, a nice powder coating everywhere. I believe this is drilled out for Fanatic, Logitech, and Thrustmaster, these holes. And actually I thought maybe these 2 holes were going to be for the AccuForce version 2 that I have. But I measured the centers on those holes on that, but it's not there. Maybe if you have the bracket for it, it would fit those holes, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we'll see what fits once we get it there. But I'm probably going to be mounting, in fact, I know I'm going to be mounting a direct drive wheel system to this, and probably my Cole Morgan 54 to give it a real good stress test on the rig to see if there's any flex in it. But we'll get to that bridge we'll cross that bridge rather when we get to it, because I'm not sure how this is going to fit the holes line up, but chances are I might be drilling some holes in this plate later. Now, it's actually going to sit on these bars. Now, these bars, and you'll see in a second, or in a minute, that this goes down into the crossbar that we put in, and they sit in there, and then this side of the flange is going to go against this. So we have that going like this, and then of course we'll have our holes lining up, though mine are not lining up exactly yet, but anyway, the holes will line up, and then we'll have that pivot function for the wheel deck. So, and we're going to use these 3/4 inch bolts, and we have a washer on each side of this bolt, on each side that we're going to be putting these into. So what we'll do now is just take it over there and get it screwed on. Now I'll just slide these pieces in that we saw before in a closer look at this, and you want this flange or this plate to be on the inside facing each other when we put these in here. So we'll just go ahead and slide this one in like so, and you can just let it rest there, because we are going to be having some knobs here that'll adjust this so we can move this in and out. And you notice with the angle here, as we move this up, it's actually going to be moving towards the driver just a bit. Not a whole lot, but a bit. Okay, so now we just got to get the tray itself mounted. So let's do that. Got my bolts here. And again, we're going to want it, the slot needs to be towards the rear of the rig. So we'll go ahead and get these apart. And remember, there's going to be a couple of washers here. You're going to make sure that you get those installed correctly. And there's actually a way to get these washers on the right way and the wrong way. The shiny finished part of a washer is usually the side that you want facing towards the bolt or the nut, depending on where it is. So there's two sides to these washers. One, you can feel it and it's kind of rolled off on the top. But that's just something that I like to do, is make sure I get the washers in the right orientation if they don't go flying away on me. So let's go ahead and get one of these in. And I think the best way to do this is just go ahead and put one in, and then I'll have the nut and the washer sitting right here. And this is going to be a little tricky because I'm going to have to run around the other side. So I'm going to get this into the back. Actually, I got to back this out a little bit because it's such a tight fit in here. I can't just let it hang there, which is no big deal really. Just got to find our hole. And there's one hole. I'm just going to let that sit there. And yeah, that'll just hang right there. And then I'll get another bolt and get it on the other side before it falls on me. And I'm pretty shocked it hasn't fallen. Because usually, you know, you try to do something like this and it's slipping everywhere. It won't do what you want it to do. But yeah, now that I have two bolts in here, I'm pretty secure, so I don't have to worry about it go flying off on me somewhere. So we'll go ahead and put our washer on and our 7/16 nylon nut. And we'll do the same thing over here, just so it won't pop off while I'm putting the other two in, because I can guarantee you it would do that. And then I would have to either shoot the video again or just let you guys see my mess up. All right, so we just have two more to do here. And again, pay attention to the orientation of your washers. We're going to flip this up, get that slot lined up, and just kind of let it hang there like that. Perfect. Yeah, this stuff really goes fast. It doesn't go so fast when you're shooting a video on it, but it definitely goes fast. I could see where you could probably have this thing configured, and as far as the frame goes, in a pretty short time. Of course, then you're going to have to mount seats and shifters and wheels, systems, pedals, and that would take a little bit more time, because not only are you mounting them, but you're also trying to get them set up so the right place for you or whoever is going to be driving the rig. But this, it will go pretty fast, this part of it. Right. So now we've got it in. We'll be able to adjust this wheel tray at a pretty good angle. It's got a really good range of angle. You can see that right there. Yeah, that's pretty cool actually. I like that. So no matter what wheelbase you have or whatever brackets support your wheel, yeah, I could imagine that it will suit anybody. Now we go ahead and lift on this together. So yeah, oh, that's looking pretty good there. Wow. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I think that I'm at a point to where I might be able to go ahead, and because I'm not going to put the seat on yet, I'm going to, because of this kind of seat I'm putting on, I'm not going to have rails, or if I do put rails on here, sliding rails, I'm going to have to fab up a bracket for it, but we'll get to that when we get there. But right now, I think we're good to go as far as snugging things up, and that's what we'll do, and then come back and take a look at it. All right, so we're going to take a look at the shifter mount, which is the last piece or a last accessory that comes with this kit before we start adding other accessories. And obviously I've got other accessories to put on this rig too, but this is what comes with the rig when you buy it if you don't buy any other accessories. So it's a 1-inch square pipe, 1/8 inch thick, very, very substantial as usual. Everything on this rig is very, very heavy and very stiff. Now, how we're going to mount this is to this plate. And this is the shifter mount plate. We can put a handbrake on it, shifter, whatever else you want to put on it. And this is actually a 1/4 inch steel plate, and it's very, very heavy in the hand, as you might imagine. So yeah, a lot of presence there. So we should, something dense and heavy like this, like the rest of the rig, I'm suspecting, or expecting rather, that we're going to get some pretty good tactile feedback from this type of construction. So pretty simple, really. We've got these top holes here. Now there are some side holes. See these side holes? And they're actually offset from the top holes. Okay, and the reason is that is you can actually mount a Husingveldt shifter to this side, and then you can mount like the handbrake to this side. If you go to their site, you can see it set up that way. And yeah, so that's why it's kind of staggered that way. This is really, the whole rig is kind of a Husingveldt engineering centric type of cockpit, that if you have that equipment, it's going to bolt right up. And if you don't, well, most other stuff is going to bolt up too, I think. But of course, never fails when I want to bolt something up. If it's something else, I'll end up having to modify something. But that's just the way it goes with building rigs and constructing rigs in general. So we'll just take this plate, and these bottom holes here will go towards the rear of the rig. So basically, we're just going to set this on top here like this. I'll just set it on the side. Easier to get to it that way. And just run the bolts. And these are 1.5 inch bolts that come in the kit. And you just run those through. And of course we're going to put a nut on the bottom of it, and I'm just going to hand tighten this for the moment just to show you guys how this goes together. Again, very simple. All this stuff, it's just bolt together. Couldn't be any easier than this, I don't think. And now we'll have it, this part of the arm will go into, when we walk over there to the rig, and you'll see how that works. So this sits here kind of like that. Now, I imagine you could also take this plate and put it on the top of this bar if you had some kind of a shifter that had some kind of a clearance problem here. Well, with the plate sitting on top of the bar, kind of like this, then you wouldn't have any side clearance issues up to making contact with the side of the rig somewhere. Right, and of course that big long slot in there gives us the adjustability so we can actually slide this back and forth to better adjust it. So that gives us a height adjustment, and it gives us a reach adjustment for our shifter. Pretty nice, actually, I think. So what I'm going to do is go ahead, and next thing we'll do is go over to the rigs and put this in and take a look at what it looks like. So now it's just a simple matter of taking this end of the bar, obviously the one that doesn't have a plate on it, and sliding it into this 1 inch, actually 1.5 inch, I believe, 1/8 square bar that's welded to the side assembly. So we slide that in, and you notice we've got two locks here. We got one over here in the corner, and we've got one on the flat part, which should give us a pretty stout or stiff mount, I would think, depending on how high you go with this. But we'll just put it right about there, and we just tighten the one on the corner of that square tube, and then one on the flat part of the square tube. And just snug them down. You don't have to crank a lot of torque on this, because once I've done that, it's pretty tight. And of course, we still have the option to slide this back and forth for the reach. Very nice. So yeah, I kind of like where this rig has gone to this point. It's a very sturdy rig, I can tell already. I'm going to go ahead and secure everything nice and tight, and then we'll come back and look at the rig as just the base, well, the ultimate kit rather, that you get, and see how everything works, and just take a look at it in general before we start adding all the extra accessories that I have to put on this rig. All right, so we've got the final version of the ultimate rig without any additional accessories. This is what it comes stock with, and we've got all the bolts cinched together tightly, and the rig, I can tell you right away, is just like a rock. This thing is, I could push on this and back and forth, and this is, when you have pieces like this put together, this is typically where you'll find the weakness, is when you push on it laterally, not so much back and forth. And yeah, this is no give whatsoever. And again, I'm only 147 pounds, but still, it's not moving, and you can tell right away when something is a solid piece of equipment that you're actually handling. And yeah, it reminds me of the P1 rig when I first put that together and bolted all the fittings tight together. It was just like this. It's just rock, man, like you're climbing on top of a boulder or something to sit down. That's how tight this is. And of course, that's a testament to the heavy gauge steel that was used in the construction of this, and also the welding and everything else that went into this rig. Yes, really for this kind of a rig where you just bolt it together, and it's it's kind of a prefab deal, I've never, to date anyway, felt anything as solid as this after I had it put together. This thing is just, yeah, it's above and beyond what I was expecting. So Also, we have installed the band here. Okay, so you might not have seen that where I did this because it was just 2 screws and I put it on. I didn't put it in the video, but it's just that little, not little, but it's a 1 inch thick, 2 inch wide band that goes across here, just attaching these 2 side assemblies together. Of course, this is the main attachment, this and the pedal tray and the seat tray in the back. So, anything else we want to talk about? Oh yeah, I left this loose because I wanted to show you guys this. When we put the wheelbase mount on here before, I didn't show you that we actually, obviously you saw this adjustment, and of course we can adjust these 2 pipes here up and down, but you also have a reach adjustment on this, and you can actually slide this back and forth. So that's a pretty good reach there. Actually, it's about 5.5 inches, right? So yeah, that gives you a good reach as far as being able to adjust for your wheel quickly without having to add an extender, like a hub extender. A lot of times you'll see me running one of those because I'll use different ones, so I don't have a front and back adjustment that's easily done on the P1 rig. You can do it, but yeah, it's much easier just for me to actually, put a hub on instead of unbolting everything and sliding it around, especially if I'm just using something temporarily. The wheel tray, let's talk a little bit about that. Very solid unit, as we saw before when I was putting it together, and it's on sliders. Now, the thing about sliders is if you put sliders on a seat and you put them on the pedals, it's not going to feel as solid as if you just mounted it directly to a frame, right? I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. Like I said, you can't get past that because you have 2 sliding pieces of metal there. And again, we've got a cam in there and we've got the teeth that grab and all that stuff, but when the teeth are grabbing, there's still going to be just a minute bit of movement. But for a pedal tray and a seat, I'm thinking it's probably not that critical because we're putting pressure backwards, like forwards and backwards this way. We're not really putting this kind of pressure on it when it's on a slider, unless you have a motion sim. And yeah, so that really is probably not going to matter so much, and I'll find that out when I'm using it, because this is the first time I'll be using a rig that has a slider on the pedal tray. And if we push this down, you can see it moves a pretty good distance. And actually I did a little quick clip here as an experiment, and you see this here, that I am actually pushing it and manipulating it rather, and you can see the range here is 7.5 inches. So yeah, that's plenty of range for this tray. I couldn't imagine you need more than that, and it really works pretty well. It's very smooth. But again, because it is a slider, it's not going to be quite as stiff as if we mounted it solidly. And we'll put the pedals and everything on this later on when we do the part 2 video. There will be a part 2 video, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned it before, because this is taking, as usual, it takes me so long to go over stuff that I'm going to do a part 2, and that's going to be a setup where we actually put the peripherals on the rig itself and run it. So, yeah, I guess that's about it as far as, yeah, I don't have much else. Oh, yeah, one more thing. These cinching knobs that go on this, you can see them here, they actually are at 2 different angles on the actual accessory mounts for the front. And you have one on the corner of the square tube, and you have one on the flat part. So we're actually grabbing the tube that goes down in there by its corner of it and by the flat part of it, which, trust me, that's the way this is mounted. Well, this is actually just 2 flats, and it doesn't even have the corner mount. And it's very, very stiffly mounted. It's very well done. And yeah, I like the way he did this here. And like I said, it's just little things like that, little attention to detail and trial and error, and figured out that it worked better for the shifter mounts that go on either side here. And yeah, anyway, it's just little things like that that I notice and like to comment on. So other than that, yeah, we're going to get to I got obviously about 3 or 4 accessory pieces I'm going to be putting on this, and just to show you the accessories that are available, keyboard mount and some other stuff. And we'll just get to that part next. And again, we'll start putting things on this rig when we finally get to the setup part of the video, which will be part 2. Now let's take a look at the keyboard tray accessory that goes, again, you have to order this separate from the rig. And there's a few others, obviously, I'm going to go through too. But I thought I'd do this one because this kind of is the most complex one, even though it's not that complicated. All right, first thing is we got to mount it to our keyboard. Our keyboard will have a place to rest once we mount this. And this assembly is kind of nice. I like the way he's done this. First off, there's 2 different keyboard trays. We got this one, which is the small tray, and the keyboard obviously would just sit in here in these little lips here. Again, all all this stuff is welded on. So again, very heavy duty, 1/8 inch steel. And yeah, so it sits in there pretty simple like that. And I would probably put Velcro on there, just a couple of places, not a whole lot of Velcro, because I want to be able to take the keyboard off whenever I want to. And yeah, this will allow me to do that. Now we also have the monster keyboard tray, which is really more of a table than just a keyboard tray. And this is it. I think I can get it all in the frame here. And it has this crinkle finish to it. I'm not sure what this is. And I think it feels like it's Durlin. Let's look at the back of it. Yeah, it feels more like a Durlin backing on here, which is, you know, very stiff stuff. This thing, it's got some flex to it, but not much at all. And the reason is because he's also put an 1/8 inch angle steel along the bottom edge here. See this? So this obviously is going to really make this part rigid, especially down here where your keyboard's going to be resting. And there's a little bit of lip there. See if you see that, where the keyboard will rest against. Not only that, but your keyboard, you can have a mouse here and, you know, a beer over here or something. So this is actually a table. I don't know if I call it a keyboard tray so much. And actually, this is cool. I like this kind of stuff because you can actually use your rig for regular computer duties when you have something like this. You can actually play your regular games where you need a keyboard and a mouse, your first-person shooters and things like that. So yeah, very cool. And while I have this one has the screws in it that'll go in either this one, or if you get this, whoops, if you get this one, then you'll get the screws. They won't be mounted in this, obviously. They'll be included with the kit that you put this one on with. And these screws are just regular screws with little nuts on them, and you can see that they are flathead, so that they're sitting below the surface of this tray, right? And the same thing will apply, let's put this aside, for this tray. You see that these holes in here actually have a countersunk or counter bore on them, so that we'll just use these screws when I mount this one. Chances are, though, I'm not even going to mount this one. I'm just going to mount the Big Daddy and see how that does, because it's going to be heavier and it's going to be pulling on the mount part that goes into the frame more than this will. And I just want to see the effects, that's all, because so far this cockpit is very, very stiff and very stable, and I like to see what something like this would do with, say, the keyboard and a mouse sitting on it. Anyway, so that's this choices we get. Now this piece here obviously is the articulating arm. We've got a joint here, we've got a joint over here, and of course that allows us to do this, right? And we can do this, right? And then of course this one, which is kind of tight, well, let's just do that. And actually you can go in here and pop these caps off, and there's a screw and a bolt, or a screw. It might be a screw into a threaded. Let's see what we're looking at. No, it looks like it's, I don't see any threads in either side of this. So chances are it's a bolt going through there. And just loosen it up just a hair and it'll move easier. But then once we have this mounted, we might want it that stiff. I don't know. It's something you got to wait and see about. Now, this mount is a VESA mount, and we have a 75 millimeter VESA spacing on this inner part. And on the little winglets out here, that's 100 millimeter VESA, standard spacing, industry standard stuff. And the reason we have two different ones is so he can use this for regardless if you order this one, which has 75 millimeter VESA spacing, or if you order the big monster table, which has 100 millimeter VESA spacing. So he can use the same flange here for whichever keyboard tray you decide to get. Very cool. All right, and the last piece to the little puzzle here is this little guy. And this is actually, again, going with the theme of this rig. Very heavy duty steel, 1/8 inch steel tube, 1 inch, or maybe that's 3/4. Let's see what that is. Okay. Let's see. Survey says, yep, that's 1 inch, or 26 mil, whatever you want, or 25 point whatever mil. And yeah, so very solid. Again, it's been welded here to this piece, this little T piece here, and this is being held on by 2 bolts. This little bracket here on both sides, and of course the standard safety nuts, so we can actually take that off if you want to for whatever reasons. And then we have the pivot point here, and this is where this part of the mount is going to fit in. And we're going to pull this out. Now this bolt is actually, this must be sourced from somewhere in Asia, because this is actually a 6 millimeter cap head socket screw here. So I had to use a 6 millimeter wrench to get it out. And yeah, so we're going to pull that out because I want to show you the spacers in here are the little plastic things. Go ahead and pull the bolt out. So there's the bolt, and you can see it's a solid bolt except for the end where the threads are, so it's very strong. And here's these little plastic spacers. And what's that where they're going to go is, you see right here, see how this has 2 holes in it? And then the big hole? Well, this has 2 tabs on it to match those holes, and it'll go in like this, right? And then we're going to slide this in between this, right? With one on each side, obviously, of this. And that's going to give us a pivot point, so it's not metal to metal. We're actually rotating on those plastic bits. So I just thought I'd point that out in case you guys ever get something like this. You'll know that you need to make sure you don't lose these and make sure you put them in there because they're very important to the function of this unit. Right, so that's pretty much it. I am going to, what we'll do next is, I'm just going to go ahead and put this together. Very simple. I'm going to obviously just pull the nuts off of here and put this on, but I will do that last. The first thing I'm going to do, oops, in fact, I'll just go ahead and do that real quick since it's already out and ready to go. This is going to go into our rig this way. So you want to make sure you get your orientation proper or done properly before you put this on. Now, I'm going to have this on the left side, or rather, yeah, the left side, because I'm a righty. And we drive right side here, the right way, by the way, here in the States. Now, I'm going to mount it like this, and then the whole unit will obviously go into the rig. So all I got to do is make sure I get my plastic pieces in here and go ahead and get my bolt put on. Sorry for the loud metal noises here, but I'm working on a metal tray. And I'm going to put the bottom one on and see if it'll stay. Hopefully it will. It'd be nice and convenient if it would. There we go. And now, well, okay. Looks like I might have to hold these like this. Just holding it on the outer edges, just to keep it from sliding off when I slide this bracket on top of it. So here we go. Let's see how that works. Not too bad. Once you have those in there, it slides a little better. And then we'll take our big bolt and actually, let's see how this is working. Okay, we're going to have to go from the bottom with this bolt, okay, because let me go ahead and pull this off real quick. Ah, there goes my plastic. The threads that are tapped in this are tapped here, so, oh, actually, okay, I got it wrong. And now I'm looking at it. You can see, though, when I was looking at, I don't know if you can see that, how it's going to show up, but you can see threads there. Sure looks like threads to me, so that's kind of threw me off. But we also have threads tapped down there, and those are the threads that are grabbing the threads of the bolt. So, now we got that cleared up, Barry. Okay. We'll go ahead and slide this on and continue on what we were doing before. So the bolt just slides right through, and we'll get it started. We'll try to get it started. Sometimes you jiggle around a little bit before it'll grab the thread, and there we go. Let's take our little hex wrench, and we'll just kind of snug it up. I don't want to get it real tight because I don't know where I'm going to be with it yet, but you're going to have to see, even with it kind of tight from hand tightening, there's still plenty of movement there, but with that kind of movement also comes play, right? And we don't want that once we get it mounted. And yeah, so we can actually crank down on this a little more. And yeah, this is, oh, by the way, this is a very cool wrench set that I got. I don't know if you can read that there. It's a Wera hex, and they're very nicely done, really high tool steel, so they fit hex heads very nicely, so they don't usually screw up a hex head when you're using them. So anyway, just something in case you guys, a lot of guys ask me and they send me emails, what kind of tools were those? So there you go. Right. So all we have to do now, we've got this assembly done. I'm going to go over and stick this in the rig, and then we'll actually just take the camera over there, and I'll show you me mounting this to our VESA mount over here once this is slid down into our rig and secured. Now we have the keyboard assembly mounted into the frame where it's supposed to go, and of course this is just a little knee pad here. This is just these knobs that we saw before, and that one's at an angle, so it grabs the corner of this square pole and one grabs the flat surface of it. And it does a real good job. Once you crank down on this a little bit, you don't have to crank down a lot either. This thing is like, yes, it's like somebody welded it onto here. It just doesn't move. Very nice, very nice. I really love, again, what I'm seeing here as far as how rigid this stuff is. All right, Now, we've got the articulating arm. This is still kind of loose because no sense in tightening it up right now because we don't know where we're going to be on our sitting position yet. So just leave it loose, and yeah, no reason to mess with that. Only issue I have is, or had, I've actually fixed it, is the holes on the plate, or rather the table, don't match this 100mm VESA mount. There was just like a 1/16 off on the bottom holes on the table there. So you have to enlarge these holes to be able to shift the table a little bit so the holes will align properly. And I had to do all 4 holes to open them up a little bit, about a 1/16 inch as far as crosswise on their diameter of this these holes. And you either get the rat tail file out and try to do it, or you can do what I did, and I use what is called a multi-bit. I love these things. I use them for all kinds of stuff. They're great for if you drill a hole and it's metal and it leaves burrs. It's great for taking those burrs out, but this is what it is. It's just a little multi-bit thing there. See it? And it's got the different sizes on it. I've got a set of these. Make sure this is focusing. It's hard for me to tell sometimes. Yeah. So this thing, actually, all you do is take it and drill the hole out that's in there, and I just went one size larger on these holes than they currently were. So it makes quick work of a sticky situation instead of trying to take a rat tail file or something like that out. And it's better to work on this metal plate because it's underneath than it is to work on the Durlin plate and try to enlarge those holes because they're already counterbored or countersunk. And yeah, you don't want to mess that up because the screws will go too far down. So really this is the only choice, was to do it on this side. Not that big of a deal, and to be honest, this is the first time building this whole rig that the screw holes and everything didn't precisely line up perfectly. And really, I've built other rigs, including my Sim Experience Stage 4 rig. I mean, I was constantly having to get the right rat tail file out and enlarging the holes so that they would line up to the threaded holes underneath so I could get the bolts in. But yeah, not with this. This has pretty much gone perfectly smoothly until this VESA mount. And I don't know if it's the VESA mount's fault or, you know, the holes that were drilled in the Durlin. No way to really tell because I don't have another one of these to compare it to. But it really doesn't matter. You get your little multi-bit out, put it in the drill, and I actually got a little video here. You can see me actually drilling it out right there. And yeah, you just drill it out like that and just do all 4 holes and you're done. Clean up your mess, obviously, the metal shavings, which I've already done. And now we're ready to put the table on. So let's do that. Get over here and get it. It's leaning over here on my bench. The big table. Can't even call this a tray, it's so big. So now that we've got the holes sorted, we should be able to, and I'm going to kind of stand up and look straight down on this because that's the best way to get all your holes lined up and get your screws in there, because we got nuts going on the other side, so we really just want to get our screws in. And now you can see that they're actually going in quite easily. And they're still snug enough that it makes me confident, and I like to see that. This one's actually pretty snug too, and this one's probably going to fall right in. It does. And when they're a little snug like that, you can just take your screwdriver and just turn them. And you can see it just kind of goes right in. It's not really threaded on the other side, but it is going in to where it needs to, and I just kind of do that. And then once you keep turning it, though, it'll bottom out and it won't turn anymore. Right. And yeah, I just kind of do that to all of them to get them to sit down in these counterboard holes so that they're not going to interfere with the keyboard or anything. Just give them a quick twist just to make sure they're going down where they should. And there they are. So now it's just a matter of getting our nuts on the back. And you can't see this because it's obviously underneath, but not a big deal. It's just some nuts going on the screws. And yeah, once we tighten this up, it should be nice and solid. Again, because of this metal piece up here that they've installed on the bottom lip of this Durlin, it's going to be a very stiff surface to mount or actually place your keyboard and also your mouse. And geez, there's a lot of other things you could get on this table here. You can almost eat your dinner on this table. It's that big. But yeah, I like that. It's like I said, I might just leave this on here unless it really gets in the way. Only thing I could see where a concern might be, and of course, once we put the weight of the table in there, you can see how easy this falls now because we haven't tightened up the joint that's on this VESA mount right here. It's a matter of pulling these caps off again, and you can see there's the bottom of the bolt on behind it that would control that movement. And then if that's too loose, then I just tighten that bolt down. And this doesn't have caps on it because it's underneath. Nobody can see it. this has the caps on it, but it's underneath. But yeah, you just pop these caps off and it'll expose the bolt. Easy enough. So there we have it. We're bolted on. And yeah, this is, you can see how big that is and how much area it covers. And of course, we probably have a little slant in it. And depending on where, again, where this wheelbase platform is going to be, yeah, that's going to determine where this keyboard's going to go, because you're going to have to be able to, and I'm thinking, it's such a big table. You probably have to fold it as you're bringing it out like this. Yeah, kind of swivel it. Yeah, okay, that'll work. So that'll swivel right in there. And yeah, even though you're sitting in your seat back here, that should work out okay, I think. Well, we'll know for sure once we get everything set up on the rig. Like I said in part 2, when we do the setup and put all the peripherals on, we'll be able to tell better there. So yeah, everything's good to go now, it looks like. We've got the tray on, and there's a couple other accessories I want to go over real quick. One very cool one for a joystick. If you want to, this thing converts to a flight simulator very easily, and I've got the accessories for that. And we also have some armrests, which we can convert the armrest to something else, but we'll get to those next. Now we'll take a look at the armrest accessory that's available. And I got 2 of these sent with this rig. And you can see, again, 1/8 inch plate. And this is actually a very large surface. And I meant to show you guys the area on this, so I will do that now. And yeah, you can see this is actually 10.5 almost, actually more than 10, 10 3/4 inch long. Oop, there we go. So 10 3/4 inch long and 8 inches wide. So that's a lot of area to be putting stuff on. You can put your armrest on there. You can actually, and I could see where, yeah, if I needed to mount something, I could actually drill some holes in here and mount something to it. You could even drill some holes in here and mount some 80/20 profiles, so you have more flexibility even further. So I think this is a good accessory to order with the rig, because yeah, you can do a lot with this, but obviously it depends on where it's located on the rig, and we'll see that in a second. Now, again, everything's welded. You can see the welds under there on either side here, and of course these are welded at a 90-degree angle. And 1/8 inch, nice sturdy stuff. The whole theme here is almost kind of an overbuilt thing. It's that sturdy. Now this is a neat thing that's going to slide in. We'll see where this slides in at. This is the arm that's going to hold it. This will just go down into this. Simple enough, right? Then we tighten it up with the little knobs there, the knob screws. Or you can put it in this way, or you can put it in this way. So there's different ways you can actually turn this around to meet your needs, right? So you can spin this around depending on where you need this tray to be, right? Okay. And pretty much that's it. This is pretty simple the way this goes in. So we'll just run over to the rig here real quick and take a look at that. All right. So now, again, this is pretty simple the way this goes on. Very easy, which is great. And that's one of the things I like about this rig also. Everything's kind of, once you get it put together, everything's going to be easy to slide in and adjust. And first we'll slide this bar in, and that's going to be obviously holding this plate that's kind of sitting there precariously. And we'll go ahead and slide this in. And I'm going to go ahead. Now, when you first slide these in, there might be a little bit of some burrs or something in this tube from where the welds were done and the holes were drilled, but nothing that you shouldn't be able to kind of just, let me make sure this is loose enough. You should be able to push past, in other words. Look at that. That's the one thing about this type of stuff. You may even want to, I'm feeling around in there, what's causing that? And it looks like it's on the top here. But we may have just knocked that burr loose now that was in here. But when you do that, it kind of scrapes up the top of your surface here. What I'd like to see on this rig, especially at the price point, that the manufacturer goes inside with a file and just makes sure that it's nice and flat in there, so when you slide these things in here, it doesn't mar them up so bad, even though this is a very thick powder coating on this. Wow, this is really thick. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this, but I'm trying to show you the depth of that powder coating is very good. And that might be one of the problems why it's sticking a little bit, because they measured the steel without the powder coat, or maybe even made allowance for powder coat, but this is pretty thick on here. Right, so anyway, you can stick this here, or you can stick it in the other side here. Either one will work. And once we have it in, And I'll probably go in and clean this up a little bit. Then we take our table. What do you want to call this? You can call this a hand rest, an arm rest, or attach something else to it if you want to. And then slide this in, and again, we'll be able to adjust this up and down. And just simply go ahead and snug up our knobs here. And then we snug up these knobs. Like so. Let's see how stiff this thing is. Yeah. You know, there is a little bit of movement right there. And I'm not sure. Yes, you could probably tighten this down enough to get rid of that, I'm thinking. And we got some movement in here, because I'm just not cinching down tight on this stuff. There we go. I just felt it go there. And yeah, okay. That's better. And I got a lot of leverage grabbing it here because this is where all the pressure is being born, if you will, down in this joint here. So yeah, even so, if you're sitting on this thing, yeah, wow, this stuff is just solid. You know, I'll even forgive the burrs being inside the tube, because once you tighten this down, it's like, wow. I mean, you could probably see a little bit of movement. In fact, as I do it, I can make it move again. But all that is going past the powder coat. And once we get to metal, and it's not cinching down on powder coat anymore, that's going to stop. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So there's your armrest. Again, you could drill this out and do something with it, like put some 80-20 profile, you know, and do something different. There's a lot of things you can do now that we have this little table here. So what we'll do next is get to the last accessory, and that's going to be a joystick mount. So if you get it in flight sim mode, yeah, you can actually have a joystick in between your legs like a real fighter airplane has. So we'll get to that next. Now for our last accessory that's available. And this is going to be our joystick mount, where it allows you to mount a joystick or something else if you want. It really doesn't matter. Obviously, we can mod this to do whatever you want it to do, but it's intended for a joystick mount so that you can actually take your joystick and mount it to the top of this plate, and it's got 4 holes. Not sure if this actually, let me check something. I have a joystick over here that I use for my flight simulations, and I have it on a custom aluminum plate that I fabricated, but I got a feeling that this is made for this Thrustmaster joystick here. And you can see this is the Warthog joystick. It's got all the stuff on it. Very cool joystick. If you guys ever use one of these, you know what I'm talking about. Very nice unit here. But it's got a 4-bolt pattern on the bottom here. And just for the heck of it, because I can, and we're over an hour in the video anyway, so what's another few minutes? Let's go to inches. And what I'm going to do is get the centers off of this. And that's just by measuring the centers of these screws. And that should give me the centers of those holes. And it looks like we're at somewhere around 2.3 inches, or let me tighten that down so I don't lose it. 59 mils, maybe 60 mil, 59.55, so that could be 60. I could be off a little bit. And, yep, look at that. Right on it. So that means that this Thrustmaster joystick will mount right to this. So if you've got one of these joysticks or a Thrustmaster, I'm pretty sure they all have the same pattern like that, these kind of joysticks. And yeah, so then you can have this in between your legs when you're doing your fighter planes. That's awesome. All right, so that's what this is for. Easy enough to see that. Again, the usual heavy-duty construction 1/8-inch square tube. And over here we've got an assembly that this is going to fit into one way or the other, right? So it slides in and out and gives us a height adjustment. And then this is going to be mounted with this flange. It slides on there. This is going to be mounted, and we'll see where that goes, right into the center of the front bar for the seat plate. So this will be mounted here. It can go on top or it can go underneath. I'm going to mount it underneath because, you know, if you got a slider on a seat or something, or you're going to move your seat around, then this could interfere with this, you know, these guys sticking up in the air like this. So put it on underneath. I would imagine that's the way I'm going to do it. And then we can slide, then it'll be sliding back and forth that for our adjustment for horizontal adjustment, and of course this will go up and down in the vertical adjustment. So yeah, simple enough. They do supply a couple of long bolts. These are the 1.5 inch bolts, I believe, and again a couple of nuts and washers to go with them. So we're going to go over here and mount this up and see what it looks like. Okay, let's go ahead and get this bottom assembly. This little assembly here is going to go in these two holes, and I'm just going to drop some bolts in from the top. And that'll go down to the past the bottom. We got plenty of room for our nuts now and our washers. So we're going to do a nut and a washer at once. I kind of do this one-handed. I like to pick the washer up and nut at the same time, and then kind of put them on together with the nut pushing the washer up as and I can screw it on the top there to get it started. And that way I can kind of do it one-handed. Trying to do it one at a time can be problematic and make things kind of want to drop out on you and stuff. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and tighten this up real quick. We have to use this part because the nut is tight in there, so I can't use the box end of the wrench. Not a big deal. We just have to hold it right there. And of course, we got plenty of room to swing this Allen wrench, which normally is not the case. We end up having to do it back and forth multiple times. But fortunately, this is going to work out just great. And now we're snugging up. Easy enough. Like I said, this whole rig, everything just goes in so well. All right, make sure I get on the nut there. There we go. So now we're pretty tight. Now these, I could see where these knobs are actually. I don't know if you can see that well in the video, but they're very close to the ground here. But I can raise these feet, or lower these feet, and raise the whole rig up if I really needed to. Now, but this is just demonstration purposes, so we'll just put this puppy in like this. And it'll slide in like that. And again, we have our adjustability. We can slide it in and out at will. And then we'll just go ahead and snug these up a little bit. No sense in putting it in real tight, because I'll guarantee you I'll be taking this back off. Right. So that'll hold it in that position. And again, that really is going to be determined. The final position is going to be determined on where we're sitting and where our legs are and all that kind of good stuff. Right. So let's go ahead and get the joystick section and put that in. And just for great theatrical effect, I put my joystick on it. So yeah, so this goes down like this. I'm just going to let it rest on the concrete and then snug it up a little bit. And there we go. Once this is snug, and these are snug down, I'll go ahead and put a little torque on them because I want to see what the joystick. Oh yeah. Well, it's moving again. But like I said, this powder coating that's on here is causing most of that movement, side-to-side movement. And once we get it cinched down tight enough and just tighten it down a couple times, we shouldn't have that problem. See, it's doing it again right there. So again, I can tighten this down again. Every time I move it like that, it wears some of the powder coating down. And yeah, that's a little bit more solid there. Yeah, that's great. You know, that's, if you've never flown, I actually had my P1 rig and my Sim-Experience rig set up so I had the joystick in the center between my legs also. And it really is a better experience, I think, than having it over on the side here, with your throttle over here on this plate. And that's what I would have over here is the throttle. So, yeah, there we have it. That's the final accessory. And yeah, so this will be the end of the part 1 of this video. And this is the build video. And the next video is going to be part 2, which is going to be the setup video. And that's where I'll just go ahead and start putting my seat and my pedals and my wheelbase and keyboard and stuff like that on here, a shifter, and see how all that goes together. And then we'll drive it a little bit, and then we'll get to our final thoughts, what we think of this rig. So yeah, so far I think that this is a well-designed unit, as you guys probably can see from this yourself. A lot of thought and effort went into this, and so far it's like I said, it's sturdy, man. This thing is like, it's just not going anywhere. It's very, very tight and very sturdy. So we'll do a quick final thoughts on this before we go over to part 2. Now for a quick final thoughts segment on what we've done so far with the Spenard Simulation Ultimate Cockpit. First off, I really like the way that this unit went together. I like the way that the bolts are all the same, the nuts are all the same size, so everything, you don't have to go running around for different tools all the time to put things together. Also, I like the way that these used heavy gauge steel throughout the construction of this unit, and it shows. Once we have this bolted together as it is now, and you grab this thing and try to really make it move or budge, it's just not happening. It's really, really solid. Just, yeah. It's like I said before, if you watch the video, it's about as solid as my P1 rig was when I finished bolting all that stuff together, which actually was more things to put together than this was. If you watch the video, you know that. So anyway, the powder coating is nice on it, and everything just went together. Everything lined up perfectly, except this keyboard table right here, the large table. It didn't quite mount correctly to the holes on the VESA mount on the 100mm pattern, and we had to, and if you watched the video, I just had to take a multi-bit and drill out the holes in the VESA mount to just one size bigger, and then it allowed me enough wiggle room to get the screws in. It wasn't off that much, but it was off enough to where, yeah, it had to be done or it just wasn't going to go on. Now, it didn't have the same problem with the small keyboard tray. Its VESA mounts are 75mm centers, and it bolted right up no problem. So that was the only real problem I had as far as having to modify something. And one other thing that really struck me is, you know, I'd like to see something differently done here is when you're sliding these accessory tubes in, sometimes there's a bit of slag from the weld, or there's some metal hanging off from where the holes were drilled. So yeah, any of that kind of stuff is going to drag against those bars and make it difficult to slide them in and out. So I'd like to see that cleaned up on these units before they ship them out. And I'll probably go in and clean up the ones that I want to use, and just to make it easier, because it does scratch off the powder coat. But to be honest, the powder coat's going to get scratched up anyway because of the way we cinch down these knobs, and those screws go in there and make contact. Yeah, it's going to mess up the powder coating anyway. And in fact, we have to mess up the powder coating a little bit to get to that metal to metal cinch down pressure, or where they're making contact, so we can really cinch down on it so it won't move. And yeah, anyway, this is supposed to be a short final thought, so let's keep it short. This is part 1 video, the build video, and we're going to have part 2, which is going to be the setup video, where we set up. I'm going to put a seat on it, put my wheelbase on it, and pedals and everything else, and then we're going to drive it and see how it does as far as ergonomics. How hard is it to get a good driving position? How easy is it? And yeah, just how everything works. So what we're going to do next is get to part 2, and that's going to be the setup part of the Spenard Simulation Ultimate Cockpit.